There's a specific gesture that happens constantly in everyday conversation, one most men either miss entirely or notice without understanding what it actually means. And once you learn to read it correctly, you start seeing it everywhere. I'm Camille, and this is Both Sides of Love. Today, we're breaking down what research on body language actually says about hand movements and self touch as signals of attraction, why a single gesture on its own means far less than most men assume, and what a genuine, reliable pattern of interest actually looks like when you know what to watch for. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly how to read this accurately without falling into the trap of reading too much into something that isn't really there. Let's start with the gesture itself: hair touching, wrist exposure, and what researchers call preening behavior. Psychologists have documented this pattern extensively. When someone is genuinely interested in another person, they often engage in small, seemingly unconscious grooming behaviors, adjusting their hair, smoothing their clothing, or exposing the inner wrist, one of the more delicate, sensitive areas of the body. Researchers describe this as preening, an instinctive behavior aimed at appearing more attractive in the presence of someone specific, often without the person even realizing they're doing it. Here's the important nuance most content on this topic leaves out entirely. This behavior can also simply mean someone is nervous, self conscious, or fidgeting for reasons that have nothing to do with attraction at all. The same physical gesture, hair touching, for example, shows up in both attraction based nervousness and anxiety based nervousness. The difference isn't in the gesture itself, it's in what accompanies it. Take a man like Bill, who noticed a woman touching her hair repeatedly during a conversation and immediately assumed it confirmed strong interest, without paying attention to anything else happening around that single gesture. In reality, she was simply anxious about an unrelated work deadline, and the hair touching had nothing to do with him at all. Reading one isolated gesture as definitive proof of attraction is exactly the mistake that leads to misjudging a situation entirely, and it's far more common than most men realize. Here's the actual finding that matters more than any single gesture. Researchers studying nonverbal communication consistently emphasize that reliable signals come in clusters, not isolated moments. A widely cited framework in this research area points to looking for at least three congruent signals happening together, not just one. Eye contact held longer than a casual glance, physical proximity that increases over the course of a conversation, and mirroring, unconsciously matching your posture or gestures, appearing alongside any self touch behavior is a far more reliable combination than hair touching on its own. This distinction matters because context changes everything. Attraction based nervousness tends to look different from anxiety based nervousness once you know what to compare it against. A woman who's genuinely interested, even while fidgeting or touching her hair, typically maintains engaged eye contact, leans in rather than away, and continues actively participating in the conversation. A woman experiencing unrelated anxiety or discomfort tends to show withdrawn posture, avoid sustained eye contact, and look for ways to disengage or create distance. The self touch gesture might look identical in both cases. Everything surrounding it tells the real story. Take a woman like Sarah, who, during an actual moment of genuine interest, touched her hair while maintaining warm, sustained eye contact, angling her body toward the man she was speaking with, and unconsciously mirroring his posture as the conversation continued. That cluster, not the hair touching alone, was what actually indicated real interest. Had she touched her hair while looking away, arms crossed and gradually creating physical distance, the exact same gesture would have meant something entirely different. There's a practical reason this matters, beyond simple curiosity. Research has found that a significant percentage of adults, some studies suggest fewer than a quarter, can accurately interpret attraction signals through body language alone. That gap exists precisely because most people focus on a single gesture rather than learning to read the full cluster together. Learning to notice the combination, not just one isolated moment, is what actually closes that gap and prevents the two most common mistakes: missing genuine interest because you didn't recognize the pattern, or misreading unrelated nervousness as something it never was. So, how do you actually apply this in real life rather than simply knowing the theory behind it? Start by training yourself to notice combinations rather than single moments. If you see hair touching or wrist exposure, don't treat it as a conclusion. Treat it as one data point and immediately check what else is happening alongside it. Is she maintaining eye contact or looking away? Is her body angled toward you or turned slightly away? Has the physical distance between you decreased naturally over the conversation or stayed fixed and neutral? Answering those questions gives you a far more accurate picture than any single gesture ever could on its own. There's also an important layer here that goes beyond simply reading signals correctly. What you do with that information matters just as much as reading it accurately. Body language can suggest interest, but it was never meant to replace actual communication, and it should never be treated as a substitute for direct, clear consent in any physical interaction. Reading a cluster of signals correctly might tell you someone is likely interested in continuing a conversation or getting to know you further. It doesn't replace asking, checking in, and paying attention to how someone responds to you directly, verbally and through their continued engagement, rather than relying on inference alone. There's a broader principle worth naming here, one that applies to relationships generally, not just this specific topic. Paying genuine attention to another person, noticing the full picture rather than jumping to conclusions from a single detail, reflects the same kind of patience and care that makes any relationship healthier. Scripture describes love as patient and as something that seeks understanding rather than assuming the worst or the best based on incomplete information. Reading someone accurately, taking the time to notice the full picture rather than a single convenient signal, is itself a small act of respect toward the person you're actually trying to understand. The most useful takeaway from all of this isn't a checklist of gestures to watch for in isolation. It's a shift in how you observe people generally, paying attention to patterns instead of moments, checking multiple signals against each other instead of relying on one, and treating body language as useful information that still requires direct communication and genuine attentiveness to confirm, rather than a substitute for actually getting to know someone. If this changed how you'll pay attention in your next conversation, subscribe and let me know in the comments what body language signal you've misread before learning this. I'm Camille. This has been Both Sides of Love. I'll see you in the next one.